It is late. The day has faded softly behind the horizon, and the noise of the present has ebbed into something quieter. Here, in this hush, we begin. Not with an answer, but with a question. And not the sort of question that demands a solution. No, this is a gentler kind of wondering. The kind that lets the mind drift backward, across centuries, across landscapes, across the soft rhythms of forgotten lives. Tonight, we walk along a road paved long before your ancestors could name the stars. A Roman road, straight, firm beneath the earth, carved into the landscape with intent and design, once pulsing with the weight of armored footsteps and orders shouted in Latin. But tonight, the road is empty. No torches flicker, no sandals scuff the stone. Only wind, only frost, only memory. You may have heard of them in passing. The ninth, the Legio Ninth Hispana, a proud legion of the Roman Empire, known for their discipline, their resilience, their reputation earned in battles across the empire, from Hispania to Germania, from the streets of rebellion to the frontiers of fog. And then, one day, they were gone. No great battle, no last stand carved in marble, just absence. A silence stretched across time. What happened to the Ninth Legion? This is not a question we will answer, not exactly. There are clues, yes, theories, shards of writing and fragments of bone. But what this journey offers is something subtler. Not resolution, but resonance. Not closure, but companionship with the past. So lie back. Let your eyes grow heavy if they wish to. You are not here to solve anything. You are here to listen, to follow a path through history not with haste, but with reverence. And perhaps, in doing so, you'll find not just the shadows of a lost legion, but the echo of the world they walked through. We will begin as they did, in routine, in ritual, in the quiet confidence of those who believe the road before them is clear. Then we will step slowly into uncertainty, into mist, into disappearance, and beyond that, into the strange traces they left behind, into the world that moved on without them, and into the stones and soil that remember more than words ever could. You may drift off before the story ends. That's all right. The past moves slowly, and we do not hurry it. So if you find calm here, in this slow unraveling of the past, you're welcome to leave a quiet mark, a like perhaps, or a note in the comments, just letting us know where you're listening from and what hour the story found you. It's strangely comforting to see how many of us are falling asleep to the same gentle thread. And so, before the ninth marched into silence, they marched into routine. Their mornings were cold, their blades were sharp, their lives structured and certain, at least for a while. Let us step into that world, into the sound of iron on ice. Imagine yourself waking beneath thick wool, your breath curling visibly in the air. The canvas of your tent stiffens overnight in the frost. The damp earth beneath your cot has hardened. Somewhere outside, the morning watch murmurs Latin commands under his breath, pacing back and forth in steady rhythm. You do not rush to rise, but you know the drill. You've done this 100 times before. This is Northern Britannia, the edge of empire, and you, a legionary of Rome's Ninth Legion, know it well. You sit up slowly, stretching sore limbs, reaching for your armor. The chainmail is cold, and your fingers protest the bite of metal. You've learned to lace your sandals with numb hands, to tighten your belt even when your ribs ache, to move before you feel ready. There is a routine to it all, a rhythm. It is not comfort, but it is certainty. The camp stirs around you. Hundreds of men waking in near silence, save for the clinking of gear and the muted clearing of throats. A few low murmurs pass between tent mates. Some curse the frost. Others mutter short prayers to Mars, to Mithras, to whatever god might grant safe passage through another day. Your breath warms the inside of your helmet as you lift it into place. The morning drills begin not long after. Formations practiced in stony fields bordered by mist. You are expected to move with precision, every turn, every thrust of your pilum or draw of your gladius, timed with the man beside you. Your officers, wrapped in layers of fur over their tunics, call out corrections. The centurion's vine staff taps against a shield here, a shoulder there. Not to punish, just to adjust, to refine. The ground beneath you crunches faintly. Frozen mud. A surface not built for war, but reshaped by it. By midday, the drills give way to maintenance. Some men tend to the walls, earthen ramparts lined with sharpened stakes. Others clean weapons, patch boots, mend mail. There is always work, not just for war, but for survival. A legion is a machine, and you are one of its parts. Each cog kept turning by habit, duty, and the heavy presence of the empire behind you. But this is not Rome. This is the North. And while the Emperor's seal may mark your orders, it is the land that governs your days. The weather, first and foremost. Rain that chills to the bone. Fog so thick it swallows the hills whole. Then the silence. A silence so deep it feels like waiting. The kind of quiet that suggests watching, though by whom you cannot say. You've seen the locals, of course. Britons, Caledonians. Painted in woad, whispering in strange tongues. They do not challenge you directly, not often, but they watch. And they remember. You've heard stories from veterans, of ambushes in wooded paths, of entire patrols found days later, half submerged in peat. You do not know how true these are, but you believe them anyway. Still, life goes on. There are rations, bread, grain, dried meat, a drink of posca to wash it down, the sour tang cutting through the fatigue. Letters from home arrive when the supply lines hold. You've seen men kiss the wax seals before breaking them open. Others throw theirs in the fire without reading. There is little leisure, but men make do. Dice games, crude sketches carved into stone. A bit of carved wood passed between tents, shaped into the form of a Roman goddess or a lover back home. A few miles away, a fort rises from the hillside, more permanent than your camp. Stone walls, watchtowers, a signal post with views for miles on clear days. From here, Rome feels farther than ever. At night, fires are lit, small, carefully spaced, so as not to give away position. You huddle around one with a few comrades. You share the heat, the silence. Perhaps a song from a Gaul who remembers different winters. The stars are bright in the north, clearer than in Italia. You tilt your head and try to trace the constellations your instructor once described in the warmth of a southern courtyard. But they seem different here, colder, older, and always the sense that the world beyond the fire is watching. Your days bleed together. The calendar still turns, of course. Officers mark the festivals, the offerings. There are parades of a sort, promotions and punishments. But out here, the sacred days of the capital feel like distant echoes. You know the names of your comrades better than your own dreams. Marcus, who snores loudly. Tiberius, who never speaks of his home. Lucan, who lost 2 fingers last winter and jokes about it too often. You know how they walk, how they fight, how they laugh, and someday how they'll die. But not today. Today is drills and repairs and frost on your lashes. There are rumors of movements north, of uprisings, of unrest. The Caledonians, they say, are growing bolder, but such warnings are frequent, part of the cycle. You hear talk of patrols lost, of messengers who did not return. Still, your centurion offers no change in orders. You are to remain, to guard the pass, to hold the line. So you do. You rise, you train, you wait. And yet, change does come. Not all at once, not with fanfare, but in whispers. New orders arrive. A movement is planned. The 9th will march north, beyond the wall, deeper into Caledonia. The officers are quiet, but focused. Maps are drawn, provisions prepared. There is little discussion among the ranks. Orders are orders. Some feel pride, others unease. But mostly, there is motion. And motion is familiar. You begin packing. Coils of rope, flint and steel, rations, water skins, medical kits. The march is set for dawn. You sleep that night with your gear beside you. You dream of nothing. And so the 9th moves. Steel glinting in the early light. Footsteps falling in practiced rhythm. The cold is sharp, but you barely notice it. The fog rises to meet you. The trees grow closer. The world narrows. You pass outposts long abandoned. Old signal towers stripped bare by wind. The land feels different here, as though it resents your presence. But you keep marching. This is what legions do. You are trained for it, equipped for it, expectant of it. And yet, there is a sense, faint but undeniable, as if something has shifted. The birds have stopped singing. The path, once firm, grows soft underfoot. You glance at your fellow soldiers. They see it too, but no one speaks. The centurion raises a hand. The column halts. You grip your shield. Your breath comes slow, even. The fog thickens, and the forest waits. But that is not yet, not quite yet. The 9th still marches, still breathes, still believes in the order of the world. Tomorrow, perhaps, will bring change. But for now, there is the sound of iron on ice, of boots in frost, of a legion in motion, and the quiet certainty of men who do not yet know they are already becoming history. Let us follow them into that change, into the moment when rhythm gave way to silence, into the mists where the 9th was last seen. The records are not clear, but then again, they never are. Not when things go missing. There are no grand speeches, no etched accounts, no final letters from commanders detailing their position or fate. What we know of the disappearance of the 9th Legion begins not with a tragedy, but with an absence. A silence, not loud enough at first to draw attention. And so, we must begin from what we can trace. From orders, half mentioned in surviving fragments, from names found in brick stamps, from places that suggest intention, and from outcomes that suggest erasure. The 9th was stationed at Iberacum, what we now call York. It was a prominent base, vital for controlling the turbulent northern reaches of Roman Britain. They had been there for decades. By all accounts, they were seasoned, reliable, accustomed to the land, the resistance, the terrain. It was not a glamorous post. There were no temples carved from marble here, only forts, roads, grain stores, and long stretches of cold watching the hills. But sometime around the early 2nd century, perhaps 117 or 118 CE, the ninth was dispatched northward. The reason? Possibly unrest among the Caledonian tribes. A flare of resistance, as had happened before, and would happen again. But this time, the ninth did not return. They had marched into Caledonia, that is agreed upon, a territory not fully under Roman control, a land of forests, moors, and jagged highlands, a place where fog hung low over heather fields, where the earth itself seemed to retreat from the intrusion of boots and spears. They would have followed the roadways, meticulously constructed, extending from fort to fort, along Dare Street, toward the frontier, beyond the wall. Not Hadrian's Wall, not yet. It had not been built. But there were other lines, timber palisades, ditches, earthworks, and beyond them, an understanding. Rome's reach ended here. They crossed that line. What happened after is where history falters. There is no direct account of a battle. No Roman historian leaves us a description of a slaughter or a triumph. But by the time Hadrian became emperor in 117 CE, something had changed. He ordered the construction of a new wall, this time of stone, permanent, firm Hadrian's Wall, 73 miles of boundary, not a mark of conquest, but a line of containment. The suggestion is quiet, but strong. Whatever happened beyond that space, Rome did not wish to repeat it. And the ninth? Gone. In later records, they vanish. They do not appear in listings of legions stationed elsewhere, not in Gaul, not in Syria, not in Africa. They do not reappear in military inscriptions. They are not commemorated. There is no monument that reads, "To the valiant dead of the ninth." No formal list of casualties, no public mourning. And that absence says much. For Rome did not ignore its dead. It recorded, it honored, it buried. The lack of record was not neglect. It was intent. But we do have scraps, slivers of text, gaps in otherwise methodical inventories, a tile stamped with the mark of the ninth, found at the site of construction in Britain, dating to perhaps just before their disappearance. A carved name, possibly of a commander, in a forgotten corner of a fortress, and after that, nothing. Some historians suggest they were defeated in battle, wiped out, every man. Others say they were not destroyed at once, but scattered, ambushed in stages, dissolved by attrition. Perhaps survivors fled, perhaps they deserted, but such speculation cannot be proven. There are no mass graves, no battlefield remains, no swords left to rust in peat, only the land and the quiet. The Caledonians, for their part, left no written accounts. They lived in small tribes, farmed in shallow valleys, held their rituals by standing stones. They knew the Romans, had fought them before, but if they destroyed a legion, they did not carve it into stone. They let the mist claim it. Imagine the march, cold air clinging to every breath, armor weighed down with moisture, eyes constantly scanning the tree line. The enemy, perhaps, not even seen, only heard. A rustle of bracken, a torch, quickly extinguished. A horn, low and distant. You march deeper, supplies thinning, visibility failing, direction uncertain. And then, nothing. No messages sent back, no runners, no return. And in the months that followed, the silence deepened. Other units may have been dispatched, scouting parties, but if they found anything, they left no trace of it. At Abracum, new names appeared in command, fresh faces, fresh records. but the ninth was not listed among the reinforcements. Their name fell quiet. So what are we to make of this? Was it defeat? A loss so complete it was better erased? Was it punishment? A failure not to be recorded? Was it logistics? A reshuffling that simply left them off the page? Or was it deliberate? An effort to remove a shameful moment from imperial memory? The truth may lie in the quietest details, in the lack of funerary inscriptions, in the blank spaces on military lists, in the speed with which their name was passed over, in the construction of a wall. Hadrian's Wall changed the shape of the land, not because it conquered, but because it marked retreat. Rome had decided this far and no farther. Was the ninth's fate part of that decision? Did their disappearance inform the new boundaries, the sudden shift in strategy, the choice to build not another road, but a barrier? We cannot say, but the timing is precise, and the context suggestive. Some have argued that the ninth was not destroyed at all, that they were merely transferred, moved to another province, that they fought in Judea or the east. But if so, why no record? The Roman bureaucracy was thorough, and no trace of the ninth exists in the east. Their eagle standard was never recovered, their title never reassigned, their commanders never cited. A legion does not simply vanish from ink, unless someone chooses not to write. In the centuries since, the story has grown. Myths have attached themselves. Books, plays, and films have imagined brave last stands. Men encircled on snowy plains, shouts and steel and dying flames. But these are fictions, dreams. The truth is quieter, colder, slower. A unit departed and did not return, and was forgotten on purpose. And so we are left with silence, and mist, and questions. But sometimes, in history, the shape of what's missing tells its own story. A silence so carefully placed that it becomes louder than truth. Let us now look more closely at the pieces that remain. The objects, the fragments, the puzzle history left behind. Because while the ninth may be gone, their shadow still lingers, etched in stone, buried in mud, scattered across the north. So we are left with silence, and mist, and questions. But history never leaves a place entirely blank. It leaves traces, slivers, echoes, and if we listen closely enough, we may begin to see the outline of what once was. This is where we turn to the fragments, to the objects unearthed, to the inscriptions left behind, to the puzzle history left, never quite solved, never fully ignored. Let us walk now among the broken pieces. Let us find the eagle. The Roman eagle, or aquila, was more than a standard. It was more than a symbol. It was the soul of the legion. Carried by a chosen standard bearer, the aquilifer, the eagle led the way in every campaign. It was polished, worshipped, guarded with a devotion not unlike reverence. If a legion's eagle was captured or lost, it was not a mere failure of battle. It was a spiritual wound, a stain on honor, a breach in identity. To lose the eagle was to lose oneself. And the ninth's eagle is gone. There are no confirmed discoveries of the ninth's aquila. No gleaming relic recovered from a Caledonian peat bog. No bronze wings hidden beneath centuries of moss. And yet, stories of its possible resting places persist. In the 19th and 20th centuries, several archaeologists and local historians speculated that fragments of Roman standards, small bronze fittings, shards of shafts, stylized wings, found near Hadrian's Wall or in northern Scotland, might belong to the ninth, but none have been conclusively identified. The soil holds its silence. Instead, what we have are subtle things. A tile stamped with the mark of the 9th, discovered in York, possibly dating just before their disappearance. A brick crudely etched with Legnime hisp, pulled from the remains of a collapsed bathhouse. Signs that they were real, that they worked, that they built, that they left something behind. Near the wall, archaeologists have found shards of military equipment, belt buckles, pieces of Lorica segmentata, gladius fragments, rusted spear points, but again, no firm connection. The gear could belong to any unit, from any time. The North was not quiet after the 9th. Other legions followed. Forts were rebuilt. Battles were fought. What does remain, however, are the gaps, the missing inscriptions, the absence of the 9th from monument lists, from the kind of stone-carved pride the Romans were known for. On the altar of victory, once standing tall in Britain, the legions are named in order. But the 9th is absent, not erased, simply skipped, left out, not forgotten, but excluded, omitted. Then there is the case of the tombstone. In the ruins of a Roman cemetery near York, a fragment of a funerary inscription was unearthed in the mid-20th century. The text, partially worn away, reads, "Of the 9th Legion Hispana, who served loyally." The name is lost, the rest too faint to restore. But the mention is clear. It stands alone. One man, not a legion, just a sliver. He died before the disappearance, almost certainly. But his stone stands in contrast to the void that followed. A single voice still present, still marked. The others, no stones, no dedications, no record of deaths, no mass burials with carved dedications. When the legions perished, truly perished, Rome built markers, mass graves, statues, commemorations on arches, on tablets, in records. Even in defeat, they made monuments. They told the story. But for the 9th, that did not happen. Their eagle was never mourned in marble. Their loss was never etched in praise. Some historians turn to later Roman sources. They search for lines that might suggest a resurrection of the 9th, perhaps as a new unit, renamed, reassigned. But the records are either silent or vague, and the name 9th was not recycled. Other numbers were. The 12th, the 5th, the 10th, reborn in different provinces. The 9th remained dead on the page. It is this silence that gives weight to the fragments. Each absence deepens the impression. Each omission sharpens the outline of what was lost. One theory suggests that a standard from the 9th might have been taken north, buried in a sacred place by Caledonian warriors, hidden as a trophy, a message, but nothing has been confirmed. No sacred cave, no buried vault, no eagle under stone. Another theory posits that the legion's remains lie in the highlands still, scattered among peat bogs, crushed into hillsides, beneath centuries of sediment. Not in one place, but many, unmarked, unmourned. A few bones found near Perth, dated to the early 2nd century, showed Roman-style burial positions, but without weapons, without grave goods, without unit markers. Were they soldiers, or civilians, or simply unrelated dead? We cannot say. Sometimes the puzzle is not in what we find, but in what we cannot place, in the object that fits nowhere, in the artifact that refuses to settle into narrative. A fragment of Roman armor found far north of any known fort, a rusted chainmail sleeve in a place with no Roman record, a leather strap preserved in bog water, stitched in a pattern familiar to Roman artisans. Pieces, only pieces, and always questions. What if they weren't destroyed? What if they retreated? What if they fled so far or fractured so completely that no single record could follow them? Could survivors have settled among the locals? Some have speculated, quietly and without much evidence, that Roman bloodlines mingled into northern clans, that survivors married, vanished into forest communities, that Latin phrases once whispered in isolated villages were not remnants of the church, but of legionaries who no longer wish to be found. Folklore hints at Roman ghosts, figures in metal seen wandering hills, ruins said to be cursed, lakes that hide more than water. These stories do not prove anything, but they persist. And persistence, in the absence of stone, becomes its own kind of echo. In 2010, a small brooch was found by a hobbyist with a metal detector near the village of Melrose. Delicately carved bronze, shaped like a winged creature, perhaps an eagle. Roman in style. 2nd century. It is not an aquila, but it is the sort of trinket a soldier might have carried. A keepsake, a charm. The man who found it sold it for almost nothing. But for a moment, it stirred curiosity. Could it be? We cannot say, because this puzzle was not meant to be solved. It was left, perhaps, to be wondered at, not concluded. And so we search still, for eagles in the mud, for names in the stone, for proof that the 9th was more than rumor, that it did not simply fade. Perhaps the eagle broke, perhaps it was buried, perhaps it rusted in silence alone beneath a rain-soaked hill, or perhaps, in some quiet cave, it still waits, polished, guarded, forgotten. Let us step now into a different world. Not the world of disappearance, but of continuation. Because while the 9th vanished, the rest of the empire did not. The court in Rome kept its banquets. The governors issued their decrees. The world moved forward without them. And in doing so, offered its own quiet commentary. Let us enter that world. Let us walk among the ones who did not look back. It is a peculiar quality of empires that loss can go unnoticed, that even the vanishing of an entire legion, thousands of trained men, experienced officers, engineers, laborers, scribes, can pass beneath the surface of official memory, like a stone dropped into a deep river. The ripples are there if you know where to look, but the surface calms quickly. And above that surface, life continues. Let us look at that surface, smooth, gilded, unbothered by the turmoil beyond its edges. Let us walk through marble halls and shaded atriums. Let us pass through the Rome that remained, serene and satisfied, even as one of its legions slipped from history. This is not the Rome of conquest and battlefield dust. This is not the Rome of the frontiers. This is the Rome of governance, of comfort, of political timing and aesthetic order. When the 9th disappeared, the imperial court was undergoing a transformation. The year was likely 117 or shortly after, a time of transition. Trajan had died. Hadrian had taken the throne. Hadrian, unlike his predecessor, did not seek expansion. He inherited an empire stretched to its limits. And where Trajan had chased borders with ambition, Hadrian sought to consolidate. It was under his rule that the decision was made not to press further into Caledonia, but instead to erect a barrier, to build a wall, not as a monument to victory, but as an admission of limits. And yet, if you stood in Rome during that time, if you wandered its streets, walked beneath its arches, listened to the fountains in its courtyards, you would not hear the word retreat. You would not hear of the 9th. Instead, you would hear poetry, legal debates, celebrations of infrastructure. You would smell fresh bread from the city ovens, hear the clatter of carts on stone, and catch the strains of music drifting from well-appointed homes. The Senate convened as usual. Scrolls were unrolled, speeches given, coins minted with the new emperor's face. The machinery of state turned on. Rome, at this time, was vast and intricately networked. Its provinces reached into North Africa, across Gaul, over the Danube, into the sands of Arabia. Goods flowed in and out of ports. Olive oil, marble, papyrus, silk, spices, tin. Messages, too, carried by relay runners, ships, and mounted couriers. The news of the 9th's disappearance, if it was received at all, would have arrived in the form of a brief report. Perhaps no more than a line in a longer scroll, a note of unrest, a mention of troop activity. No fanfare, no emotional register. Governors in Britain would have taken account. Perhaps they dispatched reinforcements. Perhaps they did not. Hadrian's Wall soon followed, and in its construction, the story of the 9th was buried. Not by conspiracy, but by indifference. The empire had other concerns. To be a senator in Rome at that time was to live a life framed by artifice and decorum. Your days were ordered, measured. You moved through colonnades and dined on dishes so finely prepared they required entire staff teams to coordinate. You wore robes of layered linen, sipped wine from Iberian vineyards, and discussed philosophy beneath mosaic ceilings. Hadrian, an emperor with architectural vision, turned his attention to projects of permanence. He funded libraries, temples, and his own villa, a sprawling estate east of Rome, designed not only for pleasure, but for philosophy and seclusion. It featured recreations of Egyptian sanctuaries, Grecian theatres, and shaded porticos that opened to hidden pools. A world within a world. In that world, there was no 9th. There was no failed campaign. There was only space for carefully curated memory, for architecture as control. In public discourse, Hadrian emphasized order and strength. He was not a man of spectacle. He disliked public games, preferring structured dialogue to performative show. And so the loss of a legion would not have served his narrative. Better to let it fade. Better to let it disappear not with scandal, but with silence. This is not to say Rome was cold, only that it was practiced in the art of survival. Its institutions were designed to absorb loss without rupture, to adjust, to smooth over. The men who once commanded the 9th would not have been accused. They would not have been celebrated either. They would simply not be mentioned. Their names might be passed over in recommendations. Their records filed quietly away. A polite forgetting. And while the 9th vanished, other legions rose. The 6th Victrix, for example, was moved into Britain not long after, perhaps to fill the void. They built, they trained, they watched the northern horizon. Their standard flew where the 9ths once had. Their men slept in barracks built from the same stone. They patrolled the same roads. But they did not speak of the others. The new men marched without history, or at least without the burden of that history, and in doing so, ensured its burial. Meanwhile, life in Rome continued to polish itself. Boys were educated in rhetoric. Girls learned music and weaving. Priests tended altars. Markets bustled beneath awnings of woven reed. The rituals of the state moved with clockwork precision. Every 8 days, the calendar turned through its cycles. Festivals marked the passing of seasons, Saturnalia, Lupercalia, Perilia. At each, the city glittered, and nowhere, not in song nor in script, was the ninth named. Imagine walking through the forum during this time. Stone columns glowing in the late light, orators standing atop their platforms reciting Cicero with theatrical restraint, vendors calling out in layered voices, coins clinking in the palm. In the distance, you hear the low hum of chariots in the Circus Maximus. Even if Hadrian discouraged such sport, the empire's pleasures could not be erased entirely. You pass by a marble arch commemorating a past campaign, perhaps Trajan's. The figures are detailed, armor polished in relief. The emperor, eternal and victorious. You stop for a moment, noticing perhaps a missing space, a gap in a list, an omission. But you do not ask, because you already know. To survive in Rome was to participate in forgetting, not out of deceit, but out of necessity. The city was too large to grieve every loss, too polished to display every failure. And so, the disappearance of the ninth was absorbed, not mourned, not denied, just set aside. In private letters, perhaps, some reference remained. A note from one senator to another, a mention of the troubles in Britannia. But even these would fade. Time folds quickly in cities built on repetition. The stones outlast the stories. This is how loss survives in empires, not in shouts, but in silences, not in confrontation, but in quiet replacement. The streets remained swept, the fountains ran clear, and over polished marble, sandaled feet walked with purpose, as if nothing had happened. Let us leave those streets now. Let us turn our eyes not to marble, but to moss, not to order, but to overgrowth. Let us return to the north, to where the roads cracked, to where watchtowers fell, to where silence grew loud. Because while Rome moved forward, the places the ninth once touched remain, not in records, but in the land itself. Let us walk through that land. Let us listen to the echoes, in stone, in shadow, in silence. This is where memory takes shape without inscription, where the quiet becomes a kind of record, where the wind over heather speaks more than scrolls ever could. We begin with the highlands. The terrain is not generous. It is not mild or accommodating, nor was it so in the time of the ninth. The landscape remains difficult, shaped by ancient geologies, peatlands, ridgelines, cold rivers fed by invisible springs. You move through it carefully. Your boots catch on wet earth, your balance tested by sudden drops in terrain. There are no guideposts, only the sun when it breaks the clouds, and the sound of your breath when the wind ceases. There are forests here, but they do not welcome. The trees are old, not always tall, their growth stunted by soil and time. They lean toward each other as if exchanging secrets. Pine, birch, alder, each twisted slightly by centuries of wind. Stone walls, half collapsed, still snake through certain clearings. No mortar binds them. They were placed, not built, by hand, by memory, by people long gone. Some may predate Rome. Others may have been reshaped by Roman hands, adapting native structures for encampments, for defenses, for control. You see no names carved here, but the stones speak regardless. In one hollow, where the land dips and fills with water after rain, a group of uneven stones forms a circle. Archaeologists hesitate to assign firm meaning to such places. Some say ritual site, others say shelter. Perhaps a temporary camp, perhaps a gravesite never marked. What matters is not what we call it. What matters is how it feels. You stand there, and the air tightens slightly. Not with threat, just with presence, as though something once happened, and the land has not forgotten. Birdsong avoids the hollow. Mist lingers there longer than it should. You move on quietly. There is a trail, barely visible, leading toward higher ground. It was not made for carts, not for commerce. Likely a patrol route or a scouting path. It weaves between boulders and underhanging branches, carved by repeated steps rather than design. Along this path, you find a rust-colored stain on a stone slab. Perhaps lichen, perhaps iron leaching through rock. But it resembles something older, like the imprint of a shield, or the accidental touch of blood long washed away. Further along, the path gives way to open hillside. From here, you can see for miles. You imagine what the Romans saw. A series of distant valleys, the faint shimmer of lochs, hills that roll like the backs of sleeping animals. To the trained military mind, this was a risk. Too many places to hide, too few to camp. No flat, open fields for formation. No villages willing to yield. Only landscape, only distance, only uncertainty. In these hills, remains have been found, but never enough. A broken piece of pottery, scorched by fire. A buckle, Roman in design, found beside a river stone that bore no tool marks. Iron nails, consistent with Roman sandals, scattered, not clustered. No fortress, no trenches, no rows of bodies, just evidence of passage and of pause. One site near Glen Loy reveals a rectangular depression in the earth, too orderly to be natural, too shallow to be a grave. Excavations unearthed a few burned posts, some charcoal flecks, and nothing else. But the dimensions match Roman standards for temporary field camps. A resting place, perhaps, or a retreat point, abandoned in haste or swallowed by snow, and now absorbed into the moss. The climate here preserves and erases in equal measure. Peat bogs can preserve organic material for millennia, but winds, floods, landslides, these erase what rests near the surface. Time in the highlands does not flow like elsewhere. It pools, it sinks into stone. It weathers names until they are shapes. It turns the specific into the symbolic, and the symbolic into silence. There are caves too. Some say the ninth fled into them, that a small detachment, ambushed and desperate, retreated into dark hollows along the ridge. These tales come from local tradition. Oral histories pass quietly through generations. Stories of men in armor who spoke no known language, who did not emerge, or who emerged changed. Nothing has been found in those caves, but the stories continue. Children are warned not to linger near them. Shepherds leave offerings nearby, a superstition perhaps, or a whisper of truth too quiet for Rome to hear. Stone circles dot the landscape in places where no modern village stands. They are not Roman, but some show signs of reuse. Fire pits with ash dated to the 2nd century. Post holes suggesting shelters once built within. Were these places of worship, or refuge, or simply a landmark for lost men? The line blurs, because here, history bends toward landscape, and landscape bends toward myth. In one glen, a shepherd found a piece of metal unlike any plough blade. Polished bronze, etched faintly with lines that could be decorative or functional. He turned it over to a local museum. The inscription, if it ever existed, had worn away. They listed it as possibly Roman, then placed it in a drawer. Objects without story rarely make the display case, but the glen remembers. Fog rolls in from the west as evening nears. It does not come quickly. It seeps, down the hillsides, across the moors. It moves like breath across cold skin. You walk slower now, not because you are afraid, but because the silence feels fuller. The ground softens underfoot. The wind no longer guides. You think of the ninth again, not as a legion, not as a number, but as men, walking here, feeling the same uncertainty, the same cold, the same weight. You wonder if they looked up into the mist and saw only sky, or if they saw something else, a memory waiting to happen. You come to a ridge. Beneath it, the land descends into what might have been a Roman road. It is not marked on modern maps, but its shape is clear, straight, unnatural in its precision, now overgrown, now forgotten. You walk along it, listening to your own footsteps, to the rhythm, to the cadence of imagined armor, to the ghost of formation. A small pool of water reflects the clouds above. Near its edge, a stone lies out of place, flat, cut, its edge too clean for nature. You kneel, run your fingers across it, cool, still, unmarked, but not empty. In this place, there are no monuments, no plaques, no eagles, only terrain, only time, only fog. And yet, it holds them. In the hush between trees, in the frost that forms overnight, in the absence of birdsong, it holds them, not as names, not as heroes, but as presence, as history made invisible. You rise, look to the horizon. The mist is breaking slightly. A thin line of light touches the hills, not enough to warm, just enough to show the way. You walk on, not to find the ninth, but to walk where they walked, to let the land speak, and in doing so, to listen, not for answers, but for echoes. Because some stories do not end with explanation. Some do not close their doors neatly or lower their curtains when the performance is done. Some simply settle into the soil, into the folds of memory, into the long rhythm of time that neither shouts nor apologizes. They rest in places where no scroll was written, where no statue was carved. They remain not because someone remembered them, but because the world did not know how to forget. The Ninth Legion vanished. We say that because we lack the details, the data, the firm place to point and say, here it was, and here it ended. But we know, at the very least, that something happened, that a unit so long in service, with so many lives woven into the fabric of empire, did not continue in the way Rome expected it to. And perhaps that, more than the event itself, is what matters. They did not continue, not in name, not in stone, not in victory parades or in the tales recited at evening gatherings. Their absence became their story, and in that story, we find something older than history, something more enduring than parchment. We find a reminder of how many lives are lived and lost beneath the surface of official memory, how many names were spoken only once, how many deeds were never written down. You see, for every monument that rises, 100 remain unwritten. For every eagle that glints in sunlight, another lies buried beneath fog and frost. The world is not made of what we remember. It is made of what remains when remembering fails. We have walked through 5 landscapes tonight, each one holding a different layer of this forgotten tale. We began with the rhythm of daily life, steady and cold, lived without suspicion of what was coming. We marched with them into uncertainty, into orders that felt routine but carried no return. We studied the puzzle they left behind, broken artifacts, gaps in the record, and absences louder than presence. We turned our eyes to Rome, where silence was policy and survival depended on omission. And then we returned to the land itself, where the shape of loss still lingers in the way mist moves through the hills. Each segment offered something different, yet they all circled the same absence. In this absence, there is no horror, no crescendo of violence, no final stand to dramatize. There is simply a vanishing, a soft line between what was and what was not, and perhaps that is why it stays with us, because not all endings are loud. Some slip quietly between the lines, some are never seen, only sensed, and some, like this one, are never meant to be solved, but only understood. You may still wonder what became of them. Were they ambushed in fog? One century dissolving into the next without record or remains? Did they retreat, fragmented and forgotten, their identities shed like cloaks in a storm? Were they buried together or scattered alone? One man at the bottom of a ravine, another beneath a cairn that no longer stands. Or did they perhaps survive in ways the empire did not wish to write about? Changing sides, disappearing into forests, living quietly until the last of them died in a bed, remembered not as a soldier, but as a stranger who once walked with iron on his feet. The truth, whatever it was, did not find its way into history's official tongue, but it may live elsewhere, in the sound of water against stone, in the groan of wind over peat, in the hush of early morning when no birds sing. And that too is a kind of record. The land holds memory differently than we do. It does not catalogue, it does not organize, but it remembers in shape, in texture, in sound. The trail worn thin, the field where grass will not grow, the rock that feels warm though no sun has touched it. These are records not of what happened, but of the fact that something did. And sometimes that is enough. You may forget the dates, the names, even the place, but you will remember the feeling of the fog, of the stillness, of walking a path someone else walked long before, with boots you cannot see, and silence that does not end. Because the real legacy of the ninth is not in what they did, but in the quiet they left behind. It is in the pause, the breath held between lines, the way history, despite its noise, still makes space for silence. Perhaps now is the time to let the stillness take hold. Let the sound of the past soften around you. Let the questions become slow and wide. You are not here to solve. You are here to rest. You have walked with a mystery, and that is enough. Because not all stories were made to be solved. Some were made to be carried, gently, quietly, like the ninth in the mist. Thank you for walking with us. Take care and good night.